to the 29 for 29 podcast. 29 for 29 is an initiative to enable, amplify, and support young climate change makers in the run up to COP29. Our mission is to amplify their voices and give them a platform to share their stories and to inspire young people. On today's podcast, we're joined by Zainab Bie. Zainab, welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling excited. Thank you for having me here.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Hello, everyone. I'm Zainab Bie, and I've been working within the climate finance and climate policy space for almost 3 years now. So, a lot of my work and time goes into following the negotiations around UNFCCC, COPs, and SBs. So, a few of the topics that I closely follow includes the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal within the climate finance space, and just energy transition.
That's great, Zainab. Now, I'd like to ask you, what exactly inspired you to join the climate movement, and how has your journey been up until now?
It has been a hell of a ride. Initially, it was quite difficult for me to start right away in a space that is already so overwhelming. So I guess COP27 was my first COP wherein I started following climate finance, the 100 billion goal. Initially, I started working within the policy space with Greenpeace International, wherein all the policy work and the climate policy is something that is evolving each and every day. So it's like an ever evolving field. So I guess it has been quite difficult being on the top of everything, but an amazing learning opportunity for so many of us. And at the same time, I see it as a huge opportunity to bring about change in these spaces because able to influence these policies will lead to a much larger ripple effect at the national and at the local level as well. So it always feel overwhelming, but yes, rewarding as well, realizing how impactful our work can be.
I really hope you continue to do your good work. I know that you're the Asia Pacific Campaign Manager for Equal Rights, if I'm not wrong. So, while you're pursuing this role, I'm sure you work on a lot of innovative climate finance models like cap and share, right? So, could you explain to us how these models work and also their impact in reducing emissions as well as in redistributing wealth to vulnerable communities?
Awesome. That is an excellent segue to talk more about the cap and share policy recommendation and the campaign that I'm working on for this year, COP29 in Baku. So, we have come up with a policy solution called cap and share, which is a little and much different from what we call cap and trade. So, the cap and share is all about capping the carbon and charging it to what is actually recommended by IPCC to 135 dollars per ton of carbon emissions. And at the same time, we also hope and aim to create a global commons fund so as to mobilize these revenues from the capped carbon and charging them and use it further for energy transition and as a way of providing climate reparations to the vulnerable communities. So how this work is, instead of going with a universal consensus model as UNFCCC does, we hope to connect and create bilateral models within one developed country and one developing country and try to pair them up so that when we cap and charge their carbon, the mobilized fund can be used for the energy transition within the developing countries. And as you can see, within 2023 itself, 8 million people were directly affected by climate change, not indirectly, but directly affected by the calamities, by droughts, by floods. How do we make sure that justice is provided to them? How do we make sure that help and the adequate amount of funding is provided to them? There needs to be an unconditional financial mechanism to support them. And this is where in our solution of universal basic income, universal monthly cash payments come into play, wherein we are trying to reach each and every individual and try to uplift and empower these marginalized communities by giving them direct income on a monthly basis and making sure that we are able to offset the damages that have been caused by climate change and the injustices that they have been facing because of climate change.
No, that was super insightful, and are being talked about in the climate space now, and I really hope that it makes the difference that we're all hoping it does. Great. So now, on the topic of climate finance, I feel like in general, it's a very intimidating thing to young people, right? And, uh, but despite the intimidating aspect of the field, a lot of people would still like to join it, right? So, what is one message that you would like to give to your fellow youth, who are willing to enter this space? And how do you think they can navigate its complexities and still make impactful contributions, despite all the challenges?
Yes, I completely agree with you. I have met policy specialists who have 15 years of experience and still trying to understand and get hold of this whole topic of climate finance. Fortunately or unfortunately, the UNFCCC itself has not been able to properly define climate finance. But to understand and like help people understand it better and to simplify it for everyone, climate finance is the finance that is used to give to those communities, to provide climate justice to those communities who are affected by climate change in order to transition to renewable energy. So it's like a way which it's like a financial way and the funds that are given to countries and the people to transition to a more resilient, just, and equitable world. So, yes, again, it's a bit difficult and not as simplified as the definition could be. Each one of us can define our own way of looking at climate finance. And for me, the climate justice angle to climate finance does play a very important role. Initially, for me, it was really difficult to understand this topic in depth, given the difficult processes and the negotiation text is kind of difficult to understand. My only message would be to just give it a try. Start with reading the text, start with reading some articles around climate finance, what is happening in this space, and slowly you will get hold of the vocabulary of the call of the COP related vocab glossaries. You can look at them and try to understand what different abbreviations mean. For example, many people are still trying to understand what this NCQG means. But if you like begin reading several articles around it, there have been so many amazing organizations who have been trying to provide simplified knowledge and simplified information on these matters. You can go through them and try to understand and read these articles, and I'm sure you'll get an understanding of the overall theme around climate finance. And then I suggest that it might seem as a very specific and specialized field, but in itself, there are so many working streams. So as you go and specialize more, as you kind of create a base knowledge for yourself, I suggest you specialize in a particular theme and then go in depth in it. Just do not think that it's a day's work or you'll get it and you'll be able to understand everything in a week as such. It's a really long and ever evolving process because negotiations are changing every day. Also, not just the angle of understanding climate finance, I think the more important aspect is to understand what different countries think about it, how different countries perceive the climate finance as, and what are their stances on it. So it is kind of important to get the vibe check within the global economies and see what are the countries thinking about, why is it as such, and try to reflect on yourself because again, it is your viewpoint and it is your perspective that matters the most, and that will bring in authentic policy advocacy within the space.
Those were great suggestions, Zainab, and I do hope that young people take up on those before they enter the space. Going forward, I'd like to ask you that you are the youth advisor for Ørsted, right? And in that role, I'm sure you must be strategizing on how you could involve a lot of young leaders, right, in shaping the future of sustainable energy. So, what exactly are those strategies, and how do you believe young voices can effectively contribute to the net zero transition?
Thank you for the amazing question and very relevant to the work we are doing. So by now we the youth community have understood that people are working towards solving the crisis, but the pace isn't correct. So even though people are on the right track, they're not working as fast within the space so as to mitigate this crisis. And this is wherein we come into play. It is our important role to bring in urgency to the table. So a lot of our work goes into trying to understand how can we work more towards stakeholder engagement, particularly youth engagement within the energy transition space. There have been several organizations acing it and working on the capacity building of young people on how they can contribute within the green job space, within the energy transition space. If we look at it right now, the green jobs market isn't evolving at a pace as it should be. So there needs to be an understanding of what could be possible opportunities, green careers that could be there, and what or how does the future look like in this space, so as to build that capacity within young people so that they can actually pursue it. If we want to work towards energy transition, we need to create a workforce as such who is capable enough to drive that transition. And this is wherein our work comes into play. For example, we also got the chance to work with LinkedIn on what they are working on, workforce involvement, workforce empowerment around green jobs, and how do we really define this buzzword called green jobs. So a lot of work goes into understanding what could be different ways we can involve more young people in the spaces, not just the policy space, but also at the ground level. We definitely feel that each and every person from whichever field they belong to, be it a lawyer, an engineer, a scientist, each one of us do have a role to play within the energy transition, and we need to figure out what those green and climate jobs look like. At Ørsted, again, they have been quite amazing with setting up a youth panel wherein we are able to provide some concrete recommendations to the CEO directly and have his say and talk to him directly about what could be possible solutions that he could pursue and how can we work towards the energy transition in a more just manner. Personally, I feel that there needs to be more youth to youth capacity building. There needs to be more youth involved within these spaces through direct representation within the policy space, or through indirect ways as well. I feel that each one of us need to have a viewpoint and reflect on all these matters and bring our concerns or ideas into thought so that future decisions are basically based on that. And how do we make sure that our decision maker take into consideration is another thing that we still need to be creative about and still need to brainstorm about. So I just want to tell everyone that yes, there is a lot of room for you to be a part of the solution. All you need to do is just begin.
Rightly said. Yeah, I feel like this is one field in climate that's often neglected, and I think very few people are aware of it. And I really do hope that your efforts lead to a lot more young people joining climate finance. Now, let's look a little ahead in the future, and let's talk about a few key trends or innovations in the climate policy and finance space that you think are going to shape the future of global sustainability efforts?
Thank you for the question. Very relevant, in fact, during the time of AI evolving and new chat GPTs coming every quarter, I think it has become more essential than ever to kind of trying to reflect on what could be the best ways to use technology, artificial intelligence for the benefit of climate policy. So I am really interested to see what role can AI play in resource optimization, in understanding the policy work better, in helping governments come up with better policy making. within the climate policy space. So I guess it is an untapped space that we need to like focus on more, and how and think about how we can use it for our benefit. And at the same time, how can we model resilient communities? How can we predict resilient communities better? How do we predict possible constraints in creating such economies and changing our economic models into a more resilient and just models is something that AI can help us in. Another thing that I am actually quite interested in is in trying to understand how the field within the climate pricing will be evolved. This will definitely help the climate finance space as well. So what government is coming up with taxes around carbon pricing, what incentives can the government give on emissions reduction is something that is still evolving, and I'm excited to see its role in further mitigating the climate crisis. Regarding climate finance, I do have a lot of hope with the upcoming COP, known as the Finance COP, because the final decisions is going to affect several future COPs. So I guess a lot is at stake, and it is important for us to be active, especially within the finance space right now during this year specifically, with NCQG getting finalized and countries taking their bold stances on various angles. Again, it's kind of interesting how far we have come, but again, trying to understand how far we can actually do by 2030 is another angle that we need to brainstorm about and be more ambitious about. So I guess we do have a very important role to play, that is to be more ambitious and to influence and push as much as possible that these negotiations actually reach to the level that it is the most impactful way of bringing about change, and we transition better to more just and I would say more resilient economies.
No, very much agreed, and I do hope that that's what happens. Um, I think with this, we have come to the end of our podcast, and it was truly lovely speaking to you. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, your knowledge, and I'm sure a lot of young people are going to benefit from your suggestions. Thank you so much, Zainab. Do you have any concluding remarks?
No, I actually really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much to everyone at Mash Project, and I'm super excited for because the COP is just like next week, and excited on how it goes, but also preparing for the worst and preparing how hectic it is going to be, not to undermine the fact that it still remains to be a very overwhelming space, especially for young people like us. So I'm super excited to not only just work on our own selves, but also kind of create a young people community who will be attending COP and working towards and trying to empower each other out. So I would love to get connected with um, all the rest of the people who are willing to join this space and see wherein I can help others.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zainab.
Thank you so much.